Welcome to another episode of UnTangled. Jen Fraser from Firefly Partners, Sade Dozan from Borealis Philanthropy. We're going to get into it.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah, we're going to talk about real talk for nonprofit teams with your tech outreach and strategy. And we've got a great guest today. We're going to dive in and talk about all the things around technology, people, purpose, why your technology isn't going to solve your broken relationships. And I'm so excited to be joined by a good friend and a longtime friend and partner in the space. Hey, tell us a little bit more about yourself and maybe your current role and sort of a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I am Sade Dozan. I have been doing work in the nonprofit field for about 20 years. And every day I realize that it has been more than 20 years.
I know.
Sometimes I
Scary.
feel, yeah, sometimes I feel like I am just entering the point of realization and then also a level of expertise, both at the same time. So it's always been really interesting. I got
Yeah.
started in public service work, moved through to advocacy work, ended up in fundraising and kind of restarted my career there. Have worked for lots of different organizations, some grassroots organizing groups, some direct service work across homeless and education and literacy, and have ended up moving through into the field of philanthropy. So I currently work as the Vice President of Advancement at Borealis Philanthropy, an intermediary working to resource movements. And I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Yay. Yay. Tell me how right now you in your current seat, how you are
Mm,
interfacing with some of the technology that we're kind of talking about. And, sort of if people think VP of advancement, those are sort of one of those funny titles. You're like, what's that really mean? And like,
yep.
how does your day to day interact with from your seat and even within your larger team or other teams that you bump up against within the organization? How are you interfacing with some of the tech that obviously we love to wrangle and tangle with in nonprofit world? What's your seat? How's that look like from your seat?
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I first got started 20 years ago in this field, the way that fundraisers in particular, because as an advancement officer, I focus on
Mm.
mainly our philanthropic influence work. So it's
Okay.
fundraising at a very sort of different type of level. I'm thinking about it through forming partnerships and relationships with institutions and individuals to advance a shared mission, which
Love
is
it.
a little bit different than what we are taught when we first start fundraising, which is get the dollars in the door, write as many grants as possible, like. And I remember when I first started about 20 years ago, the data and technology that we were using was like your really basic like CRM, razor's edge on the desktop sort of space. There wasn't really this level suite of digital tools at our disposal. And as the work has evolved, we're now seeing AI based fundraising platforms and tools. We're
I
now
know.
starting to see, yeah, we're now starting to see like really robust website build outs that do lots of like audience tracking and measurement. So it's evolved in a much different landscape. And there is a level of traditional sort of relationship based fundraising that I think a
Hmm.
lot of folks are trying to supplement their CRM tools to do. Yeah.
Or I think to your point, I mean, let's just be clear. I'm, a bit older. When I started doing all this stuff, we were still faxing members of Congress. Okay,
Yeah.
it's like 7 tablets or something, it's like what? Um, and then I feel like we got, into a space and we kind of had some technology and I think still pretty heavily relied on, and a lot of nonprofits still, very much still rely on that like face-to-face interaction. That's why COVID was such a disaster for so many people, like getting rid of the face-to-face and having to be like, no, seriously, you need to pivot into, trying to supplement, or at that point, like completely try to replace that long-standing face-to-face personal relationship building with some technology. And a lot of folks, of course, were like, that can't do it, don't know how to do it. And then I think the pendulum has maybe swung a little far or we think we can swing it, I think a little bit too far, almost in the other direction where you go like AI can do it all now. Like tools can personalize, tools can do all the things.
Mm,
And some folks are, I think, maybe touching up against that space of like, hold on, don't forget the people in behind the tools. The tools aren't going to do the hard work of the relationship building or the important work. It's hard, but it's the important stuff. Like that's what we're here. That's why we're doing this work in the first place, is to connect human to human. Tools can supplement and add to that. But it's like, I feel like I've seen yesterday in the last 2 years with the kind of surge of AI has been like, oh, great. Like now we'll let the tools kind of do the work for
yep.
me. And I think that's a danger.
Yeah, I do think we saw a really big boom happen in response to how the pandemic made us shift our fundraising practices in
Right.
particular. I've been in rooms where trust meant more than any single gift ever could, and it took a lot of time and investment to build that level of trust. And the
Hmm.
pandemic shifted the avenues in which trust was built and feasible, and we started to rely on. I remember even the first time I really saw an AI companion in a room with Zoom as like a note taker was during the pandemic. And I remember
Yeah.
being like, oh, hello, welcome to this space that I didn't know you were going to record and transcribe our entire call. And I
Welcome,
love,
you third being, whatever you may
yeah,
be.
like,
I know, right?
hello. Like, I think I'm running in attention where we're starting to try to figure out how to solve for, where I love a good system. I love a well set up CRM. Like I'm definitely a data nerd. But with equity centered and movement work in particular, where trust is the main investment in some of these decade long fights that we see, technology can't actually be the driver. It has to be in service to the relationship. Part of it is like, yes, it is about money, but it is about the relationship that facilitates the understanding of like a shared stake, shared risk, shared accountability, and a tool actually tell you that nuance.
Right. Right. Yeah. We've touched on this as a kind of overarching theme of these new tools can help, they cannot replace. I think is a
Yeah.
big one. And I think the other thing that I'm watching folks start to, like when you said some things at the beginning there, you're sort of saying some of the basics, the fundamentals. And I will tell you right now, as you know good and well, like so many nonprofits, that's still where a lot of folks are. We're still trying to master, or as best we can, sort of some of the fundamentals of using the tools appropriately, like you said, to supplement the relationship building and the trust building in the right ways. And I do think there's a lot of potential, but it's sort of like now I see people at this like panic moment almost like, and then they're like,
Mhm.
oh, damn, like it's time, like I gotta go. And then I feel like I feel like I'm seeing a risk moment of like going in too deep, too hard, too fast without a good plan or understanding of exactly like how can it supplement without me then trying to, just throw myself, everybody, we're gonna just run into this in the deep end and we're gonna just dive in. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna sink or swim. And you're like, okay, slow down. Like we're
Yeah.
okay. How are you all moving through the technology adoption or things like that? How are you handling this internally in your organization?
So our organization sits at the crux of Borealis in particular, sits at the crux of movement and philanthropy. So we're
Hmm.
often both a fundraiser because we're raising resources that are needed to distribute them. So we operate both as a grant maker and as a fundraiser. And I think that puts us at a unique vantage point because I do think that we're movement aligned. I do think that we're seeing a lot of the same tensions and trends that many of our grantees are facing as well. And what we're realizing is that CRM and the data tools that we have, especially around AI, is that we're still trying to figure it out ourselves. We're trying to figure out the things that feel good, the things that maybe don't feel as good. And I
Mhm.
will say that a place where I myself have leaned in um, is to sometimes over relying on data is that there's like this seduction of efficiency,
Uh-huh.
like especially in places where you feel like you have to have a level of high capacity, sort of like nonprofit work that goes out. The promise of like a single system that organizes your life feels like a salvation. So I have been through a lot of demos. I have gone through,
Yeah,
I'm like, even though I know that like this can't be it in my mind, I'm like, well,
right.
let me see. Maybe this is the one. And it hasn't been. So
Yeah,
I think that we're navigating that. And,
yeah,
I think it's a blend. I think it's like finding a CRM that's customizable and then also thinking about a mail platform that has like integrated campaign work. And those are all things that Borealis has. Thinking about the way that we built in data tools for our reporting. But I think that
yeah,
it's about finding the tools that respond to the relationships that you're building, where the tools are supportive and not leading.
yeah. I think that's the key right there was your mission is still your mission. The work is still first and foremost. The people have to be given the right amount of freedom to explore with some guidance. I think that's the big thing that I'm talking to lots of different leaders and organizations about how to set the proper guidelines and instructions, or here's some thoughts, and here people are out there using it anyway. I think that's the thing about what I'm seeing is people are exploring on your teams. They need to have some guardrails. I mean, at the end of the
Mm,
day, too, like because you don't want people uploading, there's certain amount of guardrails and there's certain amount of like, but I want to give you some room to maybe explore and see. There's so many tools. You as an organization can't possibly, know them all and try them all out. Like you say, like I can't be on 750 demos and then find the one that's going to be this Pandora or whatever. It's going to be this major solve because it's not. I mean,
yeah,
it's like there's going to be bits and pieces in here and there. And you're not collectively going to need to try and figure this out with some guidance and some guardrails and things like that set by leadership inside an organization. But I do think it's this. I think we're watching a myth, like you said, right now, of sort of this like there's going to be the one fix or something, and there's I think we need to be realistic in that we have watched those of us who've been here for couple few decades, whatever, watch the flows of technology come in and be this big, like, oh, this is the solve, this is the thing, this is the tool now that's gonna promise all of these great things. And really, at the end of the day, we do know that it's back to the fundamentals is really the key. But I do think there are opportunities right now. These new tools do have some opportunity for efficiency, but I don't think we should oversell those efficiencies, and or that there's going to be that the tools are somehow going to you're going to be able to find or create or build a tool within the AI space too, even also there that like can take the place of again that relationship building. But there is some of this like there are efficiencies that can be created, within
yeah,
some of them like rote tasks and things like that. It's just about finding the right set that work for you as an organization and what will help free up your team in the right ways. But I do think it can be a little bit of like a needle in a haystack
yeah,
exercise where you're just like spending all this time. You're like, I'm looking for efficiency, and yet I'm being wildly inefficient, trying to
mhm,
look at all these different tools to help find the way to help me be more efficient. It's like this weird,
I
waste of time to save time kind of thing, but I don't know
understand.
if you guys have been doing that or if other folks on your team besides yourself are looking for some of these solutions, then that
Yeah,
can help.
I would say one thing that we're definitely thinking about as we're evaluating new tools that we bring in
Yeah,
is also being really honest about bias that shows up in the tools and how we can make sure that we are using our human resourcing to
yeah,
actually mitigate that
yeah,
bias. I remember one time I worked in an organization where the CRM like literally scored donors higher if it had certain zip codes, which means that oftentimes it's in wealthier, whiter neighborhoods, and the CRM wasn't being malicious. Like it wasn't doing anything specific. It was just kind of baked into the
right.
default algorithm. And I remember it took a year to actually realize that our top prospects list was missing people that who were deeply aligned with our mission, but just didn't live in those areas. And that's the bias kind of hides inside the neutral system. So
Yep,
making sure that when you bring on a tool, you actually have the infrastructure to make sure that you're equitably using it, implementing it. And I think that
yep,
that's something that we have held true at Borealis. I'm excited to talk about the ways that we could do it in a way that's like, relationship oriented.
Agreed. I'm in the same boat. I'm glad you brought up sort of the ethical
Mm.
piece of it, because that's a big one. I know that in some of the back and forth we were sharing before, this idea of the sort of extra layer of importance in doing that kind of thinking, the critical thinking about the tools. Obviously, we know all the like environmental impacts, who's controlling the systems, the data in. There's all of these sort of inherent issues, things we need to be conscious of and thinking about and talking about as we look at adopting some of these tools. I read a really interesting article about the folks behind Claude and I didn't really know this whole story about how they were going to release their tool before ChatGPT got out, and said they had so many concerns about the ethics around it that they were like, I don't think it's ready. I don't think we're ready. And then they missed and then ChatGPT got released and they missed that first to market. And they're like, that literally cost us billions of dollars, but it was the right decision. And the CEO there is still like, I think that was the right decision, because we were still looking at the model and looking at different things and the ethical implications and trying to struggle with some of these bigger questions around it, which I think are key and critical. And I think for folks in the, like you say, the movement, equity centered, these kinds of places, this is stuff we've been talking about for as long as there's been tools and tech or whatever in these organizations, to think about what's going on behind the tools and
Yeah.
the can't just use, they're not neutral.
I think tools are amazing when they're used to free you up to do the trust work. So I
Right.
think about, how a good CRM can automate administrative tasks so that your brain space is free to do relationship building. Reminders for
Exactly.
birthdays and anniversaries and key moments, like those are all great. Like, yes, CRM, do that. I think they're also CRM is good. Like, tool doesn't have to necessarily be a CRM. That's my
Right.
happy place as a
Yeah.
fundraiser. But I do think that, like, to help spot patterns, any sort of algorithm tool that helps you spot patterns. Maybe your reports show that like 80% of your time is with large donors, while grassroots aligned funders are like barely hearing from you. Like that shows a sign to rebalance. And then
Mm-hmm.
as I think about what AI integration could look like, knowing the ethical and climate impacts that AI often comes with, I do think that AI is a tool for prep, not presence, like summarizing donors' recent giving history, pulling together like public bios, maybe even like a first draft of a meeting brief. But when you get into that meeting, the AI is not going to like read a room for you. It's not going to notice like your donor's energy shifts when you talk about certain issues. Like
Right.
that's the human work. And I think we need to keep that in mind. And that also helps sort of do some of the bias de-risking.
Exactly. I think that's the key. I like the potential for, yeah, like analyzing big data sets or just these things that would take a team of people a
Yeah.
long time to get to. It also, again, obviously we know is it's how you're working the system. The people behind the tools are obviously always the most important too, but there are undoubtedly 100% tasks that can be completed in the blink of an eye that would have taken, days, hours, weeks, whatever, which I think
Yeah.
is amazing. So that we got to tap into that kind of potential. But you're right. Um, I'm excited most about the potential, like you said, to sort of free up the creative parts of our
Mhm.
brains and the sort of work that is the human side that cannot be replaced by the tools. It is the
Yep.
relationship building, it is the trust, it's the nuances, it's all these personal relationship aspects that can't be replaced. So that if you are able to take a lot of there's a million words for it, the grunt work, the mundane, the rote, the whatever, and help the
Mhm.
systems that are there get through. I think this is the thing, you have to make sure that you're using the tools for the right type of work and not
Yes.
over relying on it for anything that kind of starts to move into, don't ever let it take over your own thoughts. Don't be like, oh, you tell me what I think, AI. No, always have to do your own versions of any content. But then, yeah, that relationship building, I don't, I'm going to, I'm going to put a stake in the ground. I'm going to make a bold statement. I hope anyway, that computers and AI and tech are never going to get to the point where that is eclipsed, that
Yeah.
they take that part. That I think is obviously one of the big fears, out there, that when tools start to evolve to the point of having the ability potentially, I think that's a lot of sci-fi there, obviously, of like, could they actually get to the point of having feelings or reading the nuances or all that emotional interpretations and stuff like that. And I'm like, then we're getting a real scary space there. But I don't think that we're anywhere close to that. I mean, people are like,
I mean, I don't think we're there today that I know publicly. And also, I recall, again, even thinking about pre-pandemic access to tools
yeah,
and post-pandemic access to tools. That was 5 years, right? Like we have seen tremendous growth
no,
in what
huge.
um, we've been able to move forward. And like I have AI tools that have the ability to upload a video like this, have that sort of conversation like between the two of us, and then say, as an AI, like give basically write me another script. Like that is in the voice that sounds just like me. What I would say is that part of it is also making sure that we have a robust infrastructure of people that are holding the work that understand the ethos and equitable practices of moving forward.
Yeah,
Because I think that if you train the people that are going to be engaging with the tools, then the tools will be used properly as tools. I think about one time I had a CRM kind of like send me like an automated message that we had plugged in like a workflow in there and said like, basically 12 touch points, the donor is golden. But what it can't tell you is if those touch points actually meant anything to that person. So
right,
we were automatically getting all these green like areas saying everything's on track, but it missed how like the donor may get like a beautifully automated stewardship email that's like perfectly timed with all the right mail merges. But, the same week a bill might drop that they cared about, that like there was a vote on. And then
right,
no one from the organization was like, let me engage with this person because they were green. So we moved on. And that is a
right.
really dangerous space to get to.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Right. So it's still back to the people gotta drive. And yeah, it's a tricky space. I think we're obviously doing a lot of learning and figuring out the nuance and the balance. I think we tend to go all in and we go, oh, okay, and then we kind of, pull ourselves back a little bit from the, well, we found the things now. It's gonna solve all the trouble, all the, grunt work, whatever.
Mhm.
Got to pull back from that and still find the right balance of the people, the human side of it, and the tools, again, where you can find opportunities to
Mhm.
supplement or use the tools effectively to help your team. Yes, this golden efficiency we're all trying to find, but not at the expense of those key interactions and those key moments that only I think right now a person is going to be able to find. Awesome. So I know we're running out of time, but I don't know if you have any last thoughts about sort of the key takeaways for our listeners, anyone out there listening today or watching the video later, about sort of tools, the relationships, things we've touched on. High level takeaway.
Is thinking about the tools that you're using and how you're prioritizing. And as we all kind of enter this new technology bubble that we're really approaching quite quickly, ask yourself, if your tool crashed tomorrow, could you still call your top 10 donors? Because again, I'm a fundraiser. So
Mm,
still call your top 10 donors without looking at a single note. And if your answer is no, then it means that you actually have to do some relational work, and the tool isn't the thing that's going to get you through that. I'd also
uh-huh.
say maybe measure your success in some of those like easy pull metrics. Measure your success in the quality of relationships, not just the revenue that they generate. And that means that you have to build your culture around the how you engage with the tools first. So make sure that your values are lived in how you integrate your tools, how you onboard your staff into how they use it, and then layer in the tools that help you build relationships and an appropriate culture more organically and consistently.
Those are like extremely amazing pearls of wisdom, nuggets of goodness there that I'm going to go back through the transcript and sure I pull those out and drop those into my follow-on blog post about this, because those are both really critical points. And couldn't have said any of those things better. So I appreciate you articulating that as well as you did for our listeners. And we'll make sure to highlight those, as I think kind of those are great takeaways. Lots of things to think about. I know we're all out there in the midst of this right now as we're doing this difficult work in difficult times and trying to find the right balance to keep ahead of the game as much as we can, and like facing all sorts of financial challenges, and how we find the space, use the tools appropriately, but never, ever, ever have it eclipse the critical, personal relationships that actually drive the trust, build the trust, drive the relationships, create that long-term relationship with your donors, your supporters out there, can never be eclipsed with technology. So Sade, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing some thoughts and insights into your work and how you're approaching some of these challenges with tech in our ever wildly evolving landscape. That's like, I feel like we're in like strapped in a train car going like 750 miles down the track and just being like, I don't even know what's coming next, but doing a great job. So next week, same time, same bat channel, I will be joined by another great longtime friend, Emily Goodstein. Following on a theme, we're going to be talking about why your tech problems are usually people problems. So I feel like there's a theme here about that. So next week, we'll be here again, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, on another episode of UnTangled. This is Jen Frazier from Firefly Partners, and we'll see you then. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jen.